Okay guys, listening part 4. The topic is quite interesting here. You might have seen your grandparents, grandmother, or even now some women in the rural area, they do the knitting. Yeah, they're always knitting something. You might have seen in the old times, especially in winter, when women didn't have so many things to do. Like with cooking, they used to do the knitting and all that. So knitting, hand knitting is the topic. Okay, now I want you to imagine someone knitting a sweater, hand knitting. It's mentioned one word only, and there is no mention of number. So the answer will contain only one word, exactly. And the words that have with hyphen, they are also considered as one word, exactly. Okay, interest in knitting. And by the way, the first bullet point is knitting has long history. Just underline history. When the audio is discussing the history of knitting, it means they are discussing this. Now the second bullet point, we imagine someone like a, look here, someone like a means a person. It can be someone like a mother, someone like a sister, someone like a, and it's going to be a person. Right? Like a dash knitting. So they will say we imagine. For imagine, they may use the word visualize or anything like that. So someone like a, they are going to give the example, and this answer is going to be a person. It can be anyone like uncle, aunt, mother, or anyone like that. So let's go on.
Good morning, everyone. So today we're going to look at an important creative activity, and that's hand knitting. Ancient knitted garments have been found in many different countries, showing that knitting is a global activity with a long history. When someone says the word knitting, we might well picture an elderly person, a grandmother perhaps, sitting by the fire knitting garments for themselves or other members of the family.
We picture, answer is grandmother. So we might picture, and then they said grandmother. Now grandmother is how many words? One word. You will write it together, grandmother. So for question number 31, the answer is grandmother. Okay, question number 32. A dash ago. Whenever they use the word ago, before, it means the answer is going to be time. For example, a century ago, or something like that. Knitting was expected to disappear. Okay, let's go on.
It's a homely image, but one that may lead you to feel that knitting is an activity of the past. And indeed, during the previous decade, it was one of the skills that was predicted to vanish from everyday life.
So, decade. And for before, for ago, what is the word that they used? Before. Previously, exactly. A decade ago, and previously they used for that. Well done. Everybody is clear about it? Good. Okay, next one is about number of knitting classes, right? You don't need to read it all. Question number 33. People are buying more dash for knitting nowadays. Maybe people are buying more wool, or people are buying more needle. We need needles for knitting, right? Needles or wool or anything. Okay, so let's see what is it that people are buying more. Just focus the word buying and more, right? Let's start.
However, that's all changing, and interest in knitting classes in many countries is actually rising, as more and more people are seeking formal instruction in the skill. With that trend, we're also seeing an increase in the sales figures for knitting equipment.
Increasing in the sales figure for knitting equipment. That's right. Buying more, increase in the sales figure. For buy, they use the word increase in the sales figure. Actually, buying more, and the clue rewording for that is increasing in the sales figure. So the answer is equipment. E-K EQUIPMENT. Very good. Now, benefits of knitting. The next one. Question number 34. Give support in times of dash difficulty. It means it's going to be the type of difficulty. Mental difficulty, physical difficulty, or anything like that. And for difficulty, they can use any other word, right? So the first benefit is it gives support. For gives, they can use provide. For support, they can use the word helps. Times of. Times of means for that they can use when you come across mental challenges. So the answer would be mental if they talk like that, okay? Let's go on. 34.
So, why do people want to be taught to knit at a time when a machine can readily do the job for them? The answer is that knitting as a handicraft has numerous benefits for those doing it. Let's consider what some of these might be. While many people knitted garments in the past because they couldn't afford to buy clothes, it's still true today that knitting can be helpful if you're experiencing economic hardship. If you have several children who all need warm winter clothes, knitting may save you a lot of money.
Okay, chup kar ja. For difficulty, she used the word hardship. And the answer is economic. Understand? Think like this. Then you can. Gussa aa gaya mainu indite. Yeah. प्यारा प्यारा बोल के और चलाकी अंदर से yeah, they are just trying to confuse the students. So economic will be the answer, right? And the correct spelling. Question number 35 requires only dash skills. Now dash skills means the type of skills. Requires only. From only we can understand it's going to be something you only need something, okay? Required skills and little money to start. Okay, so let's see what sort of skills they mention.
And the results of knitting your own clothes can be very rewarding, even though the skills you need to get going are really quite basic, and the financial outlay is minimal.
So the skills you need are only quite basic. Now don't say quite is the answer, right? Basic is the answer. That's right. Well done. Let's go on. Question 36. Early knitting is the main topic. Origins are not known. Okay, forget about that. Next, 36. Findings show early knitted items to be dash in shape. Look here. What are the basic shapes we have? Triangle, square, circle, round shape, and rectangle. So answer is going to be a shape. Okay, they may use the word shape or they may use the word square, to be something like that. Let's go on.
Now let's look back a bit to early knitting activities. In fact, no one really knows when knitting first began. But archaeological remains have disclosed plenty of information for us to think about. One of the interesting things about knitting is that the earliest pieces of clothing that have been found suggest that most of the items produced were round rather than flat.
Round rather than flat. So not flat, round is the answer. See, now you're expecting shape. Shape will come and you'll write it down, okay? And they usually do it. Pehle dimag kharab karke, and now they have this thing so that this candidate should come back to us. Huh? Question number 37. The first needles, you know, for knitting needles. The first needles were made of natural materials such as wood and dash. Natural material which is readily available, right? One example is wood. With wood, they will tell you another thing. Plastic is not natural material. Keep that in mind. Okay, the answer is going to be natural material. Let's take a start with this.
Discoveries from the 3rd and 4th centuries in Egypt show that things like socks and gloves that were needed to keep hands and feet warm were knitted in one piece using 4 or 5 needles. That's very different from most knitting patterns today, which only require 2. What's more, the very first needles people used were hand-carved out of wood and other natural materials, like bone, whereas today's needles are largely made of steel or plastic and make that characteristic clicking sound when someone's using them.
Okay, so plastic? Bone, B-O-N-E. English, you know, bone, okay, not bone, bone. Yeah, well done. Bone is haddi. Yeah, exactly. So, let's go on. Question number 38. Early yarns, yarn is a material, right? Early yarns felt dash to touch. Answer is going to be a feeling. Early yarns felt dash to touch. Okay, now have you ever seen yarn? Have you ever touched yarn? So you might come across, if we touch yarn, how do we feel about it? Okay, I play the audio. Answer is going to be a feeling, and by the way, early yarns felt dash to touch. So for felt and for touch, they may use anything like that. Okay, let's see. You guys are going to the wrong side, huh?
Now, let's look back a bit to early knitting activities. In fact, no one really knows when knitting first began. But
I'm sorry, played the wrong audio.
Ancient people knitted using yarns made from linen, hemp, cotton, and wool. And these were often very rough on the skin. The spinning wheel, which allowed...
These were often very rough on the skin. Very rough on the skin means felt rough to touch. So the answer is rough. R-U-F-F. Exactly, not the other one. Rough, rough, rough. That rough is that. R-O-U-G-H. Well done. Very good. Okay, next is wool became the most popular yarn. But question number 39. Geographical areas had their own dash of knitting. Geographical area means in Pakistan, knitting style was this. In India, Bangladesh, Nepal, Sri Lanka, they had different knitting styles, right? So, geographical areas had their own method of knitting, way of knitting, style of knitting, and all that. And by the way, for off knitting, they might use the word knitting method, knitting style, knitting this, knitting that, and all that. Let's see.
Another interesting fact about knitting is that because it was practiced in so many parts of the world, for so many purposes, regional differences in style developed. This visual identity has allowed...
Regional differences in style developed. So, yeah, geographical areas had their own style of knitting. Regional differences in style developed. Question number 40. Everyday tasks like looking after dash were done while knitting. You know, people were knitting and doing something else also. Now, what that other activity is that they used to do? That will be your answer. Simple.
As I've mentioned, knitting offered people from poor communities a way of making extra money while doing other tasks. For many centuries, it seems, men, women, and children took every opportunity to knit, for example, while watching over sheep, walking to market, or riding in boats.
While watching over and looking after, they are synonyms. So the answer is sheep, S-H-I-P. Double E-P, well done. Looking after and watching over. These are the words, right? Sheep will be the answer.